Well, hello, how are you? I hope you are safe and well wherever you're watching this in the world. My name is Tony McCauley, and I've just gone live on Facebook. It's 9 o'clock here in Portstewart in Northern Ireland. And while we're still in lockdown here, I'm reading from my memoirs. It's a trilogy of growing up in Northern Ireland in the 1970s, 1980s. And at this stage, we are on to the third volume, which is called All Growed Up: What Bread Boy Did at University. You're very welcome. And I'm going to read chapter 8 tonight. We're up to chapter 8 of my time at university, 1982 to 1984, 5 is the era. And I'll stop in the middle to say hello to a few people. If you want to give me a shout out in the comments, I'll say hello to you in the middle. So anyway, this is chapter 8 of All Growed Up. Don't You Want Me, Baby? Dum dum ba dum 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 ticka 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 dum dum da dum 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 ticka ticka ticka. Aaron Ward was driving us the 3 miles to the university in his new car, and we were singing along to the intro to Human League's greatest hit on Radio 1. We always performed the routine when Don't You Want Me came on the radio, although we tended to stop when the female vocalist started singing about working as a waitress in a cocktail bar, because that didn't sound very manly. Some mornings, as we travelled to a 9:15 a.m. lecture, I imagined we were Bodie and Doyle in The Professionals, acting on a tip-off from Mr. Hudson in CI5, and we were on our way to stop international terrorists or freedom fighters from blowing up an oil refinery and killing the entire population of Coleraine. Since Aaron's parents had presented him with the gift of a Toyota, my travels to and from the university had become much more bearable. The unremitting Atlantic wind and salty rain had been hard to bear while standing at the bus stop in the mornings and hitching a lift home in the evenings. When are you going to start giving me some money for petrol, miser? Aaron asked, not for the first time. I had already had several arguments with Aaron since he accused me of not contributing to the petrol costs. Aaron and I argued quite a lot, but we never fell out. Mrs. Flood's daughter said we were like an old married couple. Oh, it's easy for you, so it is, I said. We're not all loaded like you know. I was broke most of the time, so I used my newly acquired knowledge of class politics to accuse him of oppressing me with his middle-class values. Sometimes you're just so middle-class, I complained, aware that this was a particularly devastating put-down for any undergraduate. Aaron said I was just jealous because I couldn't afford a car, which was true, but I denied this with all the fervour of Karl Marx himself. I had been adept at the use of public transport in Belfast from an exceptionally young age. Even when the buses were hijacked and burned in the middle of the road, I easily knew where to find a black taxi to take me up the Shankill. However, transport to and from university was turning out to be much more challenging, even without the inconvenience of regular bomb scares. One Sunday night, on the train, I was so engrossed in my Sony Walkman that I missed the stop for Coleraine. I was trying to figure out the meaning of the lyrics of Spandau Ballet's True, and when I casually opened my eyes, I noticed the university campus on the other side of the River Bann. I ran to the conductor for help, and he stroked his chin and explained that we were now en route to Londonderry, where I had never been before. The only person I knew up there was Marty Mullen, but he was in Coleraine, and he still didn't like me, even though I now wore a Wrangler jacket just like him. What if I ended up in the Bogside? What would happen to a wee prod from up the Shankill if he inadvertently entered Free Derry? I would have as much chance as a Time Lord accidentally landing his TARDIS on Scarrow. The conductor sniffed deeply and attempted to reassure me by explaining that I had made an all too common mistake. Bucky just do this all the time, son, he said. He clarified that the next stop was Castle Rock, which was about 5 miles from Coleraine. And if I disembarked there, I could catch a bus back into town and everything would be grand, so it would. Little did he know that I'd no money left after paying my train fare and buying a packet of potato, cheese and onion and a Caramac in Central Station in Belfast. I jumped off the train in Castle Rock and found myself standing alone in the darkness on the station's single platform. It was like the video for The Day Before You Came, but with no Agnetha, which was as bad as watching 10 without Bo Derek. When I left the tiny station, I spotted a public telephone box and wished it was a TARDIS, even harder than I usually did, because I had no coins to make a coil. If only I were the Doctor, I thought. I could be transported back in time and arrive in Coleraine before I'd even left Belfast. As long as I didn't press the wrong button and end up on the planet Scarrow, about to be exterminated by a million angry Daleks instead. I was jolted back by the realization that I had no means of transport or communication, intergalactic or otherwise, and consequently I had no alternative but to walk and walk beside a long road that in some places didn't even have a footpath. It was freezing and murky and bucketing down as I began the long trek back to Coleraine. The rain quickly flattened my carefully constructed hairstyle, washing the gel right out of my hair, and the hailstones were stinging my cheeks. It was as if the sky was taunting me. Gormless wee crater from up the shankle thinks he's something he's not. I was completely scundered. It seemed very unfair that I was being punished so severely for the relatively minor offence of paying too much attention to a Spandau Ballet song. It was as if the universe was hackling on me. I stuck out my thumb, but not one car stopped to offer me a lift. I felt lost and alone in a strange and threatening environment. I was like Harrison Ford in Blade Runner, struggling alone against all the odds on an unforgiving post-apocalyptic Earth. Some of the passing motorists sped through large puddles at the side of the road and splashed me. I was sure I could hear laughter after each drive-by soaking. After an eternity of plodding through puddles, I finally got to the warmth of Mrs. Flood's hearth in Portstewart. My suede ankle boots developed a white scum mark as they dried out in front of the fire, and my leg warmers had to be wrung out like your trunks at the swimmers. I struggled to acquire the vital skill of thumbing a lift. All day, every day, there was a queue of students outside the university sticking out their thumbs in the hope that a passing motorist would stop and provide a lift free of charge into Portstewart. This saved money on bus fares for more important expenses such as books, baked beans, and the bar. I had never hitched a lift in my life because in Belfast, everyone knew that such an activity carried the risk of being killed and dumped in a ditch for being a Catholic or a Protestant in the wrong place at the wrong time. Most people at university reassured me that it was safe to thumb a lift up here, though the female students tended to hitch in pairs to avoid perverts. Unlike in Castle Rock, the motorists of Coleraine were very generous, and someone usually picked you up after about 10 minutes. During the short journey, they usually had a friendly chat with you about what course you were doing and where you were from, and if you had asked the Lord Jesus Christ to be your own and personal saviour. I had one rather disturbing experience when a souped-up XR3 with extra headlights and spoilers offered me a lift after a long late-night session in the library on the use of propaganda in Soviet films. Within minutes of sitting down next to the fairy dice hanging from the rear-view mirror, I realised I had made an error of judgment. The driver introduced himself as "Wee Davy from Ballymena," and explained that he was on his way to the disco in the basement of the Strand Hotel in Portstewart to eye up the talent, hey. Wee Davy said he was young, free and single, but he looked about 40-something, and I could see a bald patch through his attempted mullet. He was wearing a dated wide tie and an off-white shirt that didn't quite button at the neck, and he had clearly overdone it with Brute, an old-fashioned aftershave that brought back some painful adolescent memories for me. During the course of that short journey, his speedometer reached 80 miles per hour, while he explained to me the best way to pick up a wee bit of stuff at the disco. As the newly educated feminist, I was tempted to start an argument with him regarding the derogatory terms he was using to describe women. But due to the speed we were travelling at, I decided not to distract him. The faster he drove, the more aware I was that I was clenching my buttocks against the sticky red faux leather upholstery and instinctively pressing my right foot to the floor. "Hey boy, that there brake pedal doesn't work, so it doesn't, hey, ha ha," he laughed. Then wee Davy Knievel finally released me into the safety of the night. I was feeling nauseous from the combination of exhaust fumes, motion sickness, and the details he had shared of an intimate encounter with a big blonde Betty from Ballymena in the car park of the Strand Hotel. Unlike wee Davy, I had yet to achieve a proper intimate encounter with anybody. Yes, I had enjoyed many satisfactory snogs with a variety of girls from Glengormley to Malyle, and by all accounts I was a good kisser. But I was still a virgin, like Cliff Richard and Queen Elizabeth I. The nearest I had ever come to sex was a particularly enthusiastic snog with Lorraine Dobson up an entry after the Westie Disco. It was the first night of our relationship, which had begun just an hour before during a slow dance to After the Love Has Gone by Earth, Wind and Fire. I was shocked by the sudden passion of her kisses. Before I could even run my fingers through her hair and tell her she was very special, so she started to eat the face off me. It was clear that Lorraine was much more experienced than me, and after a few minutes of the Frenchest of kissing I had ever known, I realised that if she didn't slow down, there would be a stirring in the region of the Jimmy Joe, which could lead to great shame for a wee good living fella and an unplanned pregnancy for Lorraine. I knew such a disaster would give new meaning to the words, "Don't you want me, baby?" My attempts to dampen her passion did not go down well. She became quite angry in a sexually frustrated sort of way when I unlocked tongues and asked her if she thought The Empire Strikes Back was better than the original Star Wars. Lusty Lorraine chucked me within 24 hours, telling everybody that I was too quiet for her. It was remarkable how quickly our relationship had moved to After the Love Has Gone. So anyway, do we break there and say hello to, good evening, Roberta Robinson. How you doing? Really enjoying the book, says Marty McCauley. Thanks, Marty. All caught up with All Grown Up. Mary Black, brilliant. Good to have you along. Hi, Tony. Class so far, says Jim Poole. Hi, Tony, says Betty O'Riordan. Lovely to see you. Hi, Aline Bonner. And good evening, Susan Wilgar. Good evening, Marlene Williamson. Evelyn Brown, evening, Tony, and good morning, Big Brother Nigel in Oz. Cool. Hi, Kenneth. Good evening, the Ulster Bard. Never been called that before. Hi, Norma Fleming. Hello, Tony. Internet played up last night, so couldn't watch live, but I've caught up now and looking forward to tonight. Oh, I'm glad you've caught up, Norma, and you're here live tonight. Hello, Angela and Keith. Never miss. Lovely to have you. Hi, says Karen Shaha and Michael McKinley Sr. Karen says, I think I was chatted up by wee Davy. Orla O'Sullivan says, keep us going around the roads tonight, Tony. Okay, I'll do that. And very enjoyable chapter, says Mark McCauley. Okay, so back to my love life in 1982. I definitely wasn't too quiet for the lovely girls in the Christian Union. The CU was good for meeting girls, but it was difficult to get to know them very well while praying to get saved or clapping along to Our God Reigns. Well, not everyone clapped. Some members of the CU thought physical movement during praise songs was an inappropriate way of worshipping the creator of the universe because you also moved your body during sex. I couldn't understand why sex was a sin, because if humans didn't do it, we would all die out, and God wouldn't like that. Several members of the CU also refused to sing Our God Reigns because Catholics sang it when the Pope came to Ireland. I'll not be singing Our Pope Reigns, Hamilton Johnson said with all the certainty of a free Presbyterian. Apart from these theological battle lines, the CU was one big happy family, and it wasn't long before Aaron Ward and I were being invited to the halls of residence for supper with some of the lovely girls. The Heathers from Portadown made us nice cups of tea in Tweety Pie mugs, and Leslie from up the country made us toasted Vita and cheese and shared some of her mother's delicious tray bakes. We chatted about music and TV and who fancied who in the CU. Now and again, we engaged in deep religious and philosophical debate about whether girls should wear hats in church and if Jesus would come again in the rapture and leave all the unrepentant sinners on earth while we all got beamed up to heaven, like when Spock rescued Captain Kirk from the surface of an exploding planet controlled by an evil alien entity in Star Wars. When it became clear that I was the only truly committed socialist in the gang, I felt compelled to challenge our sense of harmony, and I did this by interjecting with my most devastating put down. That's just so middle class. One evening, as we were tucking into the remains of a mountainous strawberry pavlova baked by a Heather's mummy, I became irritated with Aaron's enthusiasm for sport. After 10 insufferable minutes of tales of rugger glory, he began to enthuse about golf, and I remember my father saying, "No son of mine will ever be playing no middle-class golf." "Oh no, please, not golf. Sometimes you're just so middle-class," I interrupted. The group was supposed to bow to my socialist analysis, but on this occasion, the lovely Leslie from up the country intervened in a manner that suggested she fancied Aaron. "You're obsessed with working class and middle class. It's all class this and class that with you. There's no such thing as class," she asserted. How dare she challenge my political analysis, I thought. "But that's just a typical middle-class attitude," I continued, but to my surprise, she didn't back down. "Up the country, we don't bother with class. I never heard of class until you boys from Belfast started chittering on about it." I had never been accused of chittering on about anything in my life. Although I was a feminist now and believed that girls were allowed to talk just as much as boys, this was going too far. I drew breath, prepared a detailed retaliation of how bourgeoisie elites fear class politics because it threatens their power, when Leslie decided she had clearly heard enough of my socialism and abruptly changed the subject. "Anyway, enough of that old nonsense. Mummy's taking me to Anderson McCauley's in Belfast on Saturday to buy me a new designer tracksuit." Anderson McCauley's was a swanky department store in Royal Avenue. It had an escalator, and you could buy expensive perfume there from posh ladies wearing too much makeup. "No way," enthused a Heather from Portadown, and immediately the conversation veered away from politics to fashion. Aaron noticed this and chuckled as I huffed over my pavlova. Most of the time, though, there was little discord in our gatherings. We told silly jokes and discussed whether Boy George was male or female or both, and I did impersonations of Orville the Duck. The crack was mighty, and sometimes we laughed so much that we cried. On one occasion, we went out at midnight looking for a telephone box to see how many of us could fit inside. 10 of us crammed in, giving the impression that it had TARDIS-like proportions. But an old woman came out in her slippers and gave off that we were noisy, lazy, good-for-nothing students and threatened to report us to British Telecom and the RUC. My social life was in sharp contrast with many of my peers. Before early morning lectures, Marty Mullen complained about his hangover and boasted about how many pints he had swallowed the night before and joked that he couldn't remember half the hilarious antics he got up to while intoxicated. Everyone patted him on the back and said he was a wild boy and some handling. But I found all this talk very boring. I didn't dare to admit that I had been eating caramel squares with nice girls from the Christian Union, though, or my already questionable ideological and social credibility would have been irreparably damaged. In spite of making good friends with lots of lovely girls from the CU, I found it difficult to secure an actual girlfriend. Praying and laughing and eating tray bakes together was all very well. But I was a man, and I had physical needs now, like Clint Eastwood on a late film on BBC Two. Through an intermediary, I asked one of the girls from Portadown, who wasn't called Heather, to go out with me, but she turned me down with a no as firm as any spoken by the Reverend Ian Paisley. After that, I briefly pursued Martha from Gilnahirk, who spoke in tongues and laid her hands on you to heal you. Unfortunately, Jesus told her that although I was nice enough, I was not the man for her. It was clear that Martha didn't want to lay a single finger on me. After a while, I started to worry that I had lost my touch. How could the same sex symbol that got 14, yes, 14 Valentine's cards only a year earlier at the Belfast Royal Academy have become so repulsive? I had never had a problem attracting girlfriends before. If I'd had looser morals, I could have turned the Westie Disco into my personal harem. Like your man, Yul Brynner in The King and I, but with Belfast accents and more chewing gum. These months spent in the romantic wilderness required serious reflection, so I took my woes to the beach. As I walked along the sandy shore, praying for guidance and wondering what I should do, I decided that perhaps it was time for me to give up women for a while. I thought it would be unfair to the female sex for me to withdraw entirely, even for a short time, but that perhaps I should keep myself for a special relationship like Bobby and Pammy Ewing. I had bought a book at the Christian Union bookstall called Growing into Love by Joyce Huggett. The book was all about a Christian approach to relationships and marriage and the benefits of waiting until you were married before having sex. I read it from cover to cover, though I read the chapter on sex first, and it all made good sense to me because the more women JR had sex with in Dallas, the less happy they all seemed to become. For many in the CU, this became the handbook on how not to have sex. Growing into Love was a sort of reverse Kama Sutra. The book contained practical advice, such as always leaving the door open when you were alone in a room with your girlfriend, so others could keep an eye on you and stop you getting up to something. Everyone thought it was hilarious that the author's name was Huggett, though not everyone approved when I joked that she should have been called Joyce Don't Huggett. I could tell that I had enjoyed more Carry On movies than most of the other members of the Christian Union. When I called the book Groping into Love, I received a few disapproving tots from some of the holier girls who explained that vulgar humour was not a very good witness. I resisted the temptation to rename the author Joyce Suckett, as I suspected that a reference to oral sex would scupper any chance I had of one day becoming president of the Christian Union. Only Aaron and Leslie from up the country found my sarcasm hilarious. Of course, sex before marriage was a sin, but this was irrelevant, as I hadn't found anyone who wanted to have sex with me before, during, or after marriage. It wasn't as if I was sexually frustrated or anything. In arguments about the morality of sex before marriage, Byron Drake accused me of repressing your animal nature. You just need a good shag, Tone, he said. I argued that it was possible to have self-discipline and control your physical urges, and that casual sex and promiscuity spread disease and cause people great emotional pain, and a good socialist and feminist shouldn't be sexually exploiting women anyway. Bet you wank as much as I do, replied Byron. Byron Drake could be very annoying. We got on well most of the time, and I was pleased he approved of my new romantic clothes, even though they were obviously a cheap version of his. But how dare he accuse me of being sexually frustrated? It wasn't as if I was thinking about sex all the time. My mind didn't once wander to sex with Rita Hayworth in the library while I was trying to write an essay on sexual power and the femme fatale in film noir. When I was walking on the beach, devising solutions to the world's problems, my mind never, ever wandered to sex. I was too absorbed in the waves, churning in and out and caressing the moist sand. How could you even think about sex when the wonder of creation was all around you? The landscape was so thrilling, I sometimes had the urge to run into the ocean and thrust myself into the surf. I was much too entranced by the power of nature to imagine Bo Derek coming out of the waves in her wet swimsuit like in 10. Next, Baron would be suggesting that I imagine Bo inviting me up to the dunes, taking off her swimsuit and offering her beautiful body to me for hours of unrelenting passion. Joyce Huggett and Jesus would have disapproved of these sinful fantasies if I'd had them, which I didn't. Of course, at night it was harder, but I had no control over my dreams. I may have been single and celibate, but when I was asleep, the devil regularly tempted me with Debbie Harry in a bubble bath. But in spite of Byron's taunts, I was neither repressed nor denying my animal nature. I was definitely not sexually frustrated in any way, so I wasn't. There you are. That's a bit embarrassing. That's a bit embarrassing reading that chapter to you, but there you are. That's what's in the book. So let me say, who else is here this evening? Let me see, where did we get to? Hello, loving every minute, says Anne Writing. Hope you enjoyed the last few minutes as much as better than me. Hi, Tony says, Neve, thanks again. Glad you enjoyed it. Hello, Norma. Whatever happened to Byron Drake? Now, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure. He went back to England. I'm not quite sure what he's doing now. Not quite sure. Yeah. Maybe he's Dominic Comics. No, he's not. No, he's too young. He's too old for that. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's been lovely to have you along. I'll be back same time tomorrow night for the next chapter of All Good Up. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and stay positive.